tour, John Jorgensen. We appreciate your time and you're coming to San Diego well, actually, Fallbrook, but I kind of include Fallbrook as San Diego. But, thanks for joining the show. And, let's kind of just start it off with you're really a multi-genre, multi-instrumentalist. Uh, you know, you're known for country, but then you also do jazz, specifically in the gypsy jazz variety. Um, how did you go from like the Desert Rose Band to the John Jorgensen Quintet, and what got you to explore so many different styles?
That's a really good question, Florentino. And I'm happy to be here with you. Um, and since I grew up in Southern California, I'm always happy to play around. I feel like all of Southern California is my home in a way. I have a lot of good friends from the San Diego area, and so looking forward to playing in Fallbrook. But as far as the different styles go, even when I was a child, um, I started studying classical piano when I was 4 years old with my mom, and then I got interested in the clarinet, and I started playing the clarinet when I was about 8, and then the guitar when I was about 10. And so, in a normal day, I would practice piano and clarinet, and I would play in wind ensembles and symphonic kind of groups, but I would also play in like garage bands with my friends, rock and roll. So that was really normal from early on. And I never thought any more or less of any style of music. Like to me, classical music was just as cool as rock and roll. Rock and roll was just had equal importance to classical music for in my life. So as I grew up and learned about more styles and discovered more styles, uh, I got a job at Disneyland where I was supposed to be playing bluegrass, Dixieland, and swing. And I didn't really even know those styles or instruments when I got the job, but I needed a job. So uh, it suited me very well. And I learned how to play the mandolin. I learned bluegrass music. I learned Dixieland music on the clarinet. I discovered Django Reinhardt and learned swing music on the guitar. And this was back in 1979, 1980. So when I actually discovered Django Reinhardt and that style of music, I thought, okay, this is my style, and here's really what I want to play for my rest of my life. But unfortunately, at that time, there was just not enough interest in that style of music. There was really no places to play. Nobody really wanted to book it. So I just said, okay, that's going to become my hobby music, just something for me and my friends. And then things changed, over my career. I started the Desert Rose Band with Chris Hillman, as you mentioned, and we had some good success in country music, like a dozen top 10 singles and 5 number 1 singles. And that propelled me into also becoming a session musician, an A-list session musician in Nashville. And through that connection, Elton John saw me play, and he asked me to tour with him. So all the while, I was still playing gypsy jazz for my own enjoyment and going over to the Django Reinhardt Festival in Samoa, France. And then in about 2000, things started changing. The internet, you know, the chat groups and internet started happening, so people with specific musical tastes could find each other. And at the same time, there were some guitar companies that started building affordable versions of the guitars that you'd use to play gypsy jazz. So all of those things kind of converged. And in 2003, I was asked to recreate a couple of Django's tracks for a movie called Head in the Clouds.
Yeah, I've
And at
seen
the
a little bit of that. Yeah.
same time I was finishing up an album, which eventually was called Franco-American Swing. And that really propelled me into touring with the John Jorgenson Quintet and allowing that style of music to become my main focus for a number of years. So I'm very grateful. Uh, I was really lucky because the interest in America was really high at that time. And I had a little bit of a leg up because I'd been playing and listening to that music for a good 20 years at that point, and had a bit of a name from these other musical things that I had done. So it all kind of came together to allow me to do this.
Very cool, brother. That's amazing, man. Kind of a companion question to this is what was when you were first starting out. Who were your influences? Who inspired you to take this journey?
Well, probably the Beatles,
Yeah,
Beatles, the
yeah.
Rolling Stones, the Byrds, Buffalo Springfield, Jimi Hendrix, Humble Pie. Um, and then when I started, finding other styles, Django Reinhardt, Charlie Christian, Tony Rice, Clarence White, Eddie Cochran.
Oh yeah,
I
yeah.
played, rockabilly for a while. So Jimmy Bryant, um, Albert Lee in country, James Burton, all of these different people were inspiring. Um, I always loved Jeff Beck's playing, Eric Johnson. Um, and then there's some lesser known guys like Tony McManus, who's a fantastic Celtic guitarist.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
But
so, yeah, I feel like my influence list is like just the greatest
geez.
players of all time.
Yeah, yeah. You've even played with, I've heard him called one of the greatest guitar players ever, Tommy Emmanuel, and you've been on tour with Tommy. Yeah, so
Yeah, I met Tommy back in the 90s. He and his brother Phil recorded one of my songs, a song that I wrote for the Helicasters called Back on Terra Firma.
so
So
cool, so
I
cool.
knew of them before I'd ever met them. Imagine the 90s wasn't like a lot of internet activity and stuff yet. So I met Tommy briefly when I went down to Australia in 1998 with Elton John. We met briefly there. And then over the years, we became good friends. In fact, I mentioned that I'm going to go to Italy in April, and that's for the Suave Guitar Festival in Suave, which is near Verona. And Tommy will also be there. We're going to recreate a video that we did many years ago. Uh, the two of us, along with a fantastic flamenco guitarist named Pedro Javier Gonzalez. And the three of us did a video. It's basically Pedro's flamenco version of Sultans of Swing,
Okay.
and with Tommy and me kind of barging in on him, as it were. But the it's gotten millions and millions of views. It's been so popular. So the head of the festival, which had gone away for a couple of years, when he brought it back, he wanted to kind of recreate that moment. So we're going to do that this year.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, you've done so many types of performances with different artists. I mean, you mentioned it from Elton John. I was going to say John Legend, Elton John to Bob Dylan,
Who's a legend?
who's a legend, right? Even working with folks like Luciano Pavarotti. You know, what are I mean, you've got just tons. I mean, David Gilmour, that's my business partner's favorite guitar player of all time. Were you kind of a shout out? Were you on this last tour that he did where he played New York maybe a few months ago?
No, I wasn't part of that tour, but the Webb sisters, who I'm going to play with coming up in the UK and in Italy, were part of his tour. So
Wow.
I
Oh,
went to see him at the Hollywood Bowl, which was just fantastic. He plays
I
so
heard it was an
beautifully.
amazing show. Heard it was an amazing show.
Yeah.
So kind of with that said, what are a couple of stories, if you will, from the road that the viewers, readers, everybody who will enjoy this either through the through the video or through the article, should know about?
Well, okay. So when I was young, I think I mentioned that I was first a huge fan of the Beatles, and so I noticed that the Beatles loved Chuck Berry and Little Richard and the Everly Brothers. So I started listening to those artists, and I became a big fan of Little Richard. I loved Little Richard. So I would have never thought that I would get to actually perform with Little Richard. But the first time that I was a part of Elton John's band, we were backing up a number of artists on a benefit show for AIDS Project LA. And this was 1995, January 1995. And the whole theme of the show was kind of uh, gender, uh, gender diversity, one would say. And so you had people like Julie Andrews singing something from Victor Victoria. You had Sandra Bernhard singing something from Rocky Horror Picture Show, and all of these kind of gender fluid kind of things. And Little Richard, he could just be himself. He's just gender fluid on the norm. So anyway, I was excited about playing with him, and in the rehearsal, we had we'd been rehearsing with the different artists, and I think maybe David Page had been playing the piano before we stopped rehearsing, took a break. David Page, the piano player from Toto, and so I was over at the food table just getting something to eat, and I heard this sound of the piano, and I thought, oh, somebody's playing Little Richard's record so that we can get the idea of the next song that we're going to play. And it didn't sound quite right, and I turned around, and it was Little Richard sitting at the piano. So he had made the piano sound completely different, than David Page playing it. And so I got back up there on stage as quickly as I could, to join in. All the band kind of fell in, and we were rehearsing Good Golly Miss Molly, I believe, which is one of my favorites. And at the end of it, Little Richard said, "Y'all are good. He said, you make my big toe rise up in my boot." And that just curled up so much. It was like just perfect,
Oh man,
Richard. He was
that's a great Little
amazing.
Richard
So
story.
that's one good road story.
Yeah, that's one of those ones where it's good to meet your heroes, right? So that's they usually say sometimes it's not so good. Well, in that particular case, I think it was that's an amazing one. So very cool, very cool. Speaking of that, you're a number of people's hero, and like with the Desert Rose Band, you were named Country Music's Guitarist of the Year. Um, you know, how did that recognition? Influence what you're doing in your career, and ultimately, uh, what has that done when you talk to other guitarists who are fans?
You know, that's a really good question, Florentino. I mean, I've never been asked that before. And of course, I'm really, really proud of winning that, especially winning it multiple times. Um, the Desert Rose Band was uh, basically a group of virtuosos. So during those years that we were active, the all of the musicians, Steve Duncan on drums, Bill Bryson on bass, JD Maness on pedal steel, and myself on guitar, we each won in our respective instruments as, the player of the year. And the whole band won also as touring band of the year, which is really, really amazing. It made us really proud, but I don't know if it changed anything as far as my career goes. Um, it feels like awards in general, they may be, there's something that the effects are felt later on down the road. Um, you know, I, I don't feel like it necessarily changed anything at the time. If somebody was wanting to hire me to come and play on their record or to play with them, it's because they like my playing, not necessarily because I won an award, if you know
Yeah.
what I mean.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
But, over the years, it's fantastic to be able to say I'm a Grammy winning artist. Um, I'm a Grammy winning composer. I've played on multiple Grammy winning albums and, won these awards as a guitarist. All of those things are phenomenal. I mean, probably one of the most surprising things for me and for the Helicasters, which is a guitar group that I started in the late 80s. Um, our first album, which was called Return of the Helicasters, a little bit of a joke, it won Album of the Year from Guitar Player Magazine, and it also won Country Album of the Year from Guitar Player Magazine. So that's pretty unusual for something to be, not only Album of the Year, but also Country Album of the Year. So we were pretty proud of that and pretty surprised because the Helicasters really just started more as a fun thing to do with three guitar playing friends, and we never expected it to get real serious like that. So that was really a treat for us.
Awesome. All righty. Well, it's very amazing, man. I've always been astounded. I was blessed to have dinner with you, and we'll give a shout out to Jascan. I was talking to him yesterday that we're going to do this interview, and I was just fanboying out on all the stuff that you've done, and I knew about some of the stuff you were doing with Jascan. Yeah, shout out to Sarah. She'll be in an issue with your comments about your working on her project and future issue. But it was super amazing for me to hear all the great stuff that you've done, and one of the things I discovered because I didn't, I did my research this morning to make sure, I knew what was going on. I had a chance to watch the clip of you with in Head in the Clouds, so that was really cool. You know,
Okay, so you saw that I had like dyed black hair, I had the
oh, you look,
Django mustache,
yeah, you could.
whole number.
I was really trying to figure out is that really John? That's super cool.
See, that's
Uh,
a compliment because I don't consider myself an actor or anything, but if you can make yourself look that different, it's pretty cool.
well, one of the biggest things that not just me but other people noticed is that you didn't go to typical modern day playing. You used the two finger style that Django's known for, and that was pretty
Yeah.
awesome.
Well, when I first met the director, it was actually on the phone, and his name is John Digan, and he is what a great director he is. I was so honored to be able to work with him. Uh, and he'd been looking for somebody to recreate Django's music. And the way he put it, he said, Django Reinhardt makes a particular racket on the guitar. And you're one of the few that I've heard that can make that same sort of racket on the guitar. And I said, well, thank you, I think. Yeah. Um, and and then he said, "Well, there's also a little part of Django Reinhardt on camera." And I said, "Oh, please let me play that. I don't look anything like Django, but I'll dye my hair, I'll grow the mustache, I'll do anything to play that part." And he says, "Okay, well, we'll have to get prosthetics to do something special for your hand." And I said, "Yeah, that would be so cool." And he said, "Oh, I was just kidding. How could you play?" I said, "Well, I'm such a nerd with this that I've already learned how to play those solos using two fingers. So it would be no problem." So he knew at that moment that he had the right guy for the part.
Yeah, that is super cool, and kind of reflecting back on that, how has that influenced your current work? Being such a big a fanboy of Django's.
Well, like I said, it when I first discovered it, I felt that's what I want to do. You know, um, it's been a really rich thing, and from that time, say 2003 or so, I've gotten to play at every big Django Reinhardt festival in the world. I've been the only American artist of Gypsy jazz style to ever headline the Django Reinhardt Festival in France. So that's really unusual because they do consider it their music. So that was a huge honor. And just recently, I played a whole week at Birdland in New York, Birdland Jazz Club, along with Frank Vignola and Joshua Stefan, two fantastic players also in that style. Joshua is from Germany and Frank is from New York. We had a great time, and this was three Django nerds together, so we could do a lot of the unusual songs. You know, Django recorded something like 800 or more sides during his life, and a lot of the songs he wrote with Stefan Grappelli, and they're a little bit unusual, and most people don't play those that often. So we got to play a lot of those, unique ones since all three of us knew them. And one audience member even complained that we didn't play enough of the normal Django repertoire. And I said, man, you're coming to see these guys who are nerds. You better expect some deep cuts.
That is funny. That's very cool, man. Well, it's kind of a good segue to uh, one of the reasons why, besides being such a cool person and a great friend, why you're here. You're going to be coming on April 6th, if I'm not mistaken, to the
Yep.
Bob Burton Center for the Performing Arts in Fallbrook. So just slightly north of San Diego. We kind of bring those guys in. Anything up to Temecula, it's kind of San Diego. But with
Yeah.
that said, tell us about that show and what can people expect from the from the performances, and will they get their deep cuts on this one because this is gypsy jazz.
Yeah. Well, the thing about my quintet is, again, it's five virtuoso musicians. I play guitar, but also bouzouki, the Greek bouzouki, and clarinet, and sing a little bit. I have fantastic Rory Hoffman, who plays piano, guitar, and accordion. Casey Driscoll's on violin, Simon Planting on bass, and Rick Reed on percussion. So we hardly ever play two songs in a row that have the same instrumentation. So it's very colorful. Um, each person is virtuosic on their instrument. All five are soloists. We do a lot of my own compositions that are inspired by the gypsy jazz and some other cultural music like Greek music and gypsy music, Eastern European music, Latin. Um, and this time I think I'm going to add a couple of more Django deep cuts. I do feature his two finger playing style in one of the songs. And I think the thing that I'm most proud of is that this ensemble has incredible dynamics. My wife calls it a high wire act, and the band is incredibly tight. And we can play so soft 1 second and so loud the next second. Everybody follows me like a hawk. Um, it's just a great ensemble, and so many people say, "Oh, I don't even necessarily like jazz, but I love the music that you do in your concert." So people should come, and they don't need to worry if they don't think they like jazz or they don't think they like gypsy jazz. I think they're going to have a great time.
Well, I know that a number of people that I've talked to are looking forward to it. They're going to make the trek from San Diego up to Fallbrook and enjoy that. And, this is one of many things that you're doing. With the last question, actually, the second last question, I got two questions now. I added one
Okay.
as we're talking. But, what new projects can people expect from John Jorgensen? Collaborations, and is there another quintet album coming out? Is there other stuff? Tell us about what they can expect.
Well, I'm very much behind the curve of the new album for the quintet. We've recorded some material. Um, I guess I have to say I'm a little bit hesitant because releasing music is very, very different now than it used to be. Um, I like many other people, I don't quite have it all figured out. Um, but yeah, there's some new things that I've written and some new recordings that will probably be coming out later this year. Um, like I said, this collaboration coming up in England and Italy with the Webb sisters, Charlie and Hattie Webb. Charlie plays guitar and sings. Hattie plays harp and mandolin and sings, and the three of us harmonize together really beautifully. So I'm really looking forward to that. Of course, like I mentioned, I'll collaborate with Pedro Javier Gonzalez and Tommy Emmanuel, uh, also at the Suave Festival. And I know that next year already, we're going to have a repeat visit to Birdland with Yasha Stefan and Frank Vignola. Um, I'll be continuing to play with my bluegrass band, J2B2, and with the John Jorgenson Quintet. So it's a busy thing, you know.
Well, yeah, I know that you definitely stay busy with all that you're doing, and you have been such an inspiration for so many. And with that, the last question really comes down to because we're all musicians that work at the scene, and a lot of people who read the magazine and watch the content are players, like much like yourself, like myself. What advice do you have for the aspiring player today, whether they're going to be a side person, whether they're going to be their own recording artist, and what are some of the things that have been instrumental for you in the past that work today still, and maybe some of the stuff that doesn't?
Oh, again, good question. The thing that I always tell young people getting into it is that you have to like every aspect of it. The performing on stage is one aspect, but there's so many other aspects that you have to do to get there. You have to like setting up your instrument and taking care of your gear, and you have to like loading in and speaking to the promoter and talking to your agent and talking to the audience. I think the connection to the audience is so important. Some people forget that, they've been playing and practicing on their own for so long. When you're performing in front of someone, you have to play to them, not at them. It's like a conversation. Um, so that's something I think is really important. Don't play at people. Don't show them what you can do. That gets really boring. It might be interesting for a couple minutes to hear some technique, but as soon as you've done that, you want to give them something for their spirit, for their heart, for their imagination. Uh, I try to take the audience on a journey, and I try to set up each song so that the audience will have a context for that song. Um, yeah, I think some of the things that don't work are just too much showing off. Um, and nobody really likes that at the end of the day. Um, and dynamics is really, really important. I think people get used to a lot of music without dynamics, and probably if somebody hasn't listened too much to classical music, that would be a good thing to listen to some symphonies of Beethoven and Mozart and listen to the dynamics and then try to apply that same feeling of the dynamics to whatever style of music. Because imagine, I mean, rap is a style that seems to be very kind of one volume all the time. But imagine how much more powerful it could be if they brought it down really quiet and they're rapping or a really quiet beat, and then all of a sudden, bam, it gets huge again. Um, I think grunge was a style of music that understood that dynamic, especially a band like Nirvana and the other bands that kind of copy them. They can bring it down and then just explode, and those things really excite the audience. I think dynamics like that.
I agree 100%. I think that's interesting. I've got some. One of my associates is has a rap label, so I'm gonna mention that to him. So you never know, you might have just changed the face of rap.
You never know. I
You
mean, this
never know.
last year, you talk about different styles. The last few years, I've played also with Tone Loc, Young MC, the Sugar Hill Gang, Daryl McDaniel, uh, Tretch.
Oh,
It and that's been really fun too. I've been amazed at how great some of these rap performers are, especially I have to say the old school ones like Sugar Hill Gang are just phenomenal. If you ever
yeah.
get a chance to see them,
You know,
so
I never
positive,
did.
so
I
much.
never did, even though I was a big, I grew up with R&B, rap, and all those kinds of things. So it's pretty cool. No, that's awesome. Well, I think this. I hate to end it this way because I've got so many other questions, but I know that you've got a busy schedule, and we got to make sure that people come out to check out the show. That's going to be April 6th over at the Bob Burton Center for Performing Arts in Fallbrook, California. Um, in the link, if you're watching this, you will be able to click to get tickets. Plus, if you're reading this, you will get a chance to also see the link to get tickets. You got to go out. And it's 2 p.m. Is that the correct time that you're starting?
Yeah, 2 p.m. It's an early concert, 2 p.m. And I would just say, if you're on the fence about coming, just come. Because if your friends go and then they'll tell you about it, we may or may not come back there for another year at least.
Yeah, yeah.
Performing arts centers usually don't have the same artists repeat year after year, even if they're very successful. So, it's been quite a while since we played down in that area. We used to play in Fallbrook every now and then, probably 10, 15 years ago. But things change, and as everybody knows, life changes
Yeah, yeah.
and throws you curveballs all the time. So I'm of the mind that if you have a chance to do something, do it now. Don't wait till later because it may not be there later.
Very, very, very true. With that said, this has been Florentino Buenaventura from the Scene SD Magazine on tour with John Jorgensen. Stay tuned for more on tours in the future. And again, John, I appreciate your time, brother.
Florentino, my pleasure. Hope to see you soon.